Welcome to the another insightful episode of the 10x Marketer podcast. Today, I'm excited to pick the brain of Rajesh Srinivasan, a renowned marketing strategist who has helped countless organizations build powerful revenue generating brands. With over 18 years of experience driving demand generation and branding strategies across diverse industries, Rajesh is uniquely positioned to share his mindful approach to crafting great brands that truly resonate. A founder of Mindful Marketing and a prolific author of three marketing books, Rajesh has distilled his expertise into a framework outlining seven key characteristics that separate iconic brands from the rest. In this episode, we will dive deep into these seven characteristics. Whether you are an entrepreneur, CMO, or a marketer looking to level up your brand strategy, this conversation is sure to provide you with a treasure trove of actionable insight straight from one of the sharpest mind in the business. So get ready to take notes as Rajesh unravels the secret to building brands that captivate audiences, cultivate devoting followings, and ultimately drive sustainable growth. Welcome to the show, Rajesh, and thank you so much for joining us today. Please introduce yourself and also talk about the seven powerful characteristics that define a great brand.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much, Girdari, for having me on your show. I'm totally excited to share my thoughts on the characteristics of a great brand. So, first of all, you have introduced me, but a short note about me before we jump into the talk. Uh, I am a modern marketing strategist. I run a boutique strategy consulting firm where I advise uh, business owners, entrepreneurs, and heads of marketing on how to devise a growth strategy and brand strategy for their business. I'm also a speaker and I do workshops for companies. I'm a prolific reader. I read a lot of books. That's my passion and hobby. I have this research mindset as to I constantly observe the environment and learn from it actively. So that's what I do day in and day out. Apart from this, my wife Sivapriya, she's a homemaker. My son has just completed his undergraduation. He's a passionate movie maker. I live in Chennai, and as you said, I've authored three books. My recent book is Mindful Marketing. It is one of a kind cartoon book where I've used cartoons and illustrations to explain complicated concepts and first principles of business strategy, marketing, and branding. So let's dive into the session. So before I talk about seven characteristics of a great brand, I I always ask this question: what is a brand? What is a brand in the first place? We all talk about branding day in and day out. But to me, a brand is nothing but a meaning making device. What do I mean by that? If you notice, in essence, we humans are meaning seekers in whatever we do, whatever we buy, whatever we consume. We don't just buy things for the sake of buying, we buy it to add more meaning into your life. That's the essence of building a brand from a marketing standpoint. We seek significance and purpose in our actions as humans. So I always give this example. I mean, why do we buy a car? See, I mean, more functionally speaking, we buy a car to go from our home to our office, right? That's the very functional purpose of buying a car. But if you notice, it is deeply intertwined with our social status and personal identity. That's what I mean when I say a brand is a meaning making device. Every marketer, entrepreneur has to understand this. Why do I need to build a brand in the first place? Okay, because on the other hand, if you notice, in a commoditized marketplace, consumers usually buy products just to fulfill up their very very basic needs, functional needs. They don't seek any meaning. I'll give you some example. For example, when hunger strikes us, we could go and have a food at a roadside shop at a very very minimal cost. We don't seek meaning in that consumption, right? It's purely a consumption to satisfy our needs. But imagine if I want to host a party for my colleagues, maybe a first year work anniversary. I do not go to that roadside food shop. I choose a good branded restaurant. Why? Because it becomes an experience. It's a meaning making transaction for me. I'm not just serving food to my colleagues, right? So that's the significance of building a brand. So that's what I wanted to share before we jump into the session. Essentially, what I'm trying to say is brands are symbols of identity, status, and connection, where every choice we make carries some meaning beyond its functional purpose. So that's the premise of brand building. So, coming back to the characteristics, seven key characteristics of a great brand. I'm going to share something which I've observed. I see a pattern how do how do great brands operate. Number one, great brands stay true to their positioning. What do I mean by that? Now, if you are a company, you have some core competencies, right? Your strengths and your capabilities. When you think about building a brand, it's always better to position your brand based on your strengths and core competencies. Because if you do that, you can deliver your brand promise consistently. Take, for example, we all know DMart, right? They say we are the low cost provision store, departmental store. We usually buy, in our family, I usually accompany my wife whenever we make the bulk purchases every month for our home. Low cost. If you notice, it's deeply, this positioning of DMart is deeply ingrained in their core competency. Whatever they do, I mean, they have their own real estate shops, they buy in bulk. I mean, when it comes to distribution, so that they can get higher margin from their vendors and manufacturers, so they pass it on, pass on this benefit to the consumers. So even if you want to position as a low cost player in the market, you need to have a competency which matches that positioning and customer promise, so that there is no difference. Usually the challenge is, if you do not have a core competency and try to deliver a promise to the customer, there is a gap. We say that as a gap between what you communicate and what customer experiences. So what I mean is, good brands always stay true to their positioning. They don't communicate something which they cannot deliver. That's what I meant by that. So number two, remarkability is another characteristic of a great brand. Great brands, to me, strive to provide extraordinary products and services. It creates a wow reaction from the customers. Take any great brand, for example. That's the crux of all the brands. We may talk about advertising, all the other tactical stuff, but it's all around this remarkability quotient. Their product and service is highly remarkable, no doubt in that. Every other tactical element of marketing and branding is done around that remarkability. So, the advantage of being remarkable is you're not just relying on advertising to spread the word about your brand. When people consume your brand, naturally they become the proponents of your brand. That's key, right? So number three characteristic of a great brand is relevance. To me, relevance is nothing but whenever people think of solving a problem, of solving their pain, or uh, or their desire, this brand comes to their mind. Take Google as an example. When we want to search something, naturally we don't ask questions. We don't even recognize that we are using a brand, right? It's built in our life. That's what relevance is all about. The brand is deeply connected with the category so that when consumer thinks of solving a problem related to that, they naturally choose that brand. Any good brand is highly relevant to the lives of the customers. So, number four, meaningful differentiation and distinctiveness. This is another trait of a great brand. Meaningful differentiation. What do I mean? In the sense when a category is commoditized, it's full of it's full of brands. Any category, if we take that any category as an example, these brands stand out. Take Coca-Cola, take Nike, take a lot of new age brands like Zeroda, Zomato. These brands stand out. They are different, and they are also distinctive in the sense, if you notice these brands, you can you can easily find these brands in the crowd. That's what I mean by distinctiveness. They are built, all the assets. I'm going to talk about this in the coming characteristics, just to ensure that they are distinctive. See, if you notice in the game of food delivery, there are two brands, right? Zomato and Swiggy. It's a competitive game only between these two players. But if we notice from distinctiveness standpoint, Zomato stands out because of their communication, the way they make food consumption, food delivery as part of our culture. On the other hand, Swiggy, I love Swiggy, even I use Swiggy, but they are just positioned as a delivery company, right? So that's what I mean by distinctiveness. Number five, great brands are not abstract. Great brands have some characteristics of human so that it becomes more relatable for the consumers. These brands have a very unique identity, character, and personality, very, very similar to the human. Ideally, if you infuse the personality traits of a human into a brand, your brand becomes highly relatable to the customers. All the mental and emotional connections happen very easily because, as I said earlier, a brand is a meaning making device because we humans seek meaning in everything we do. And if you put a human face into your brand, customers naturally engage with you. I mean, you could create a lot of brand assets just to ensure that this identity, character, and personality comes out naturally. For example, we see brand mascots of like Colonel Sanders of KFC, Pillsbury Dougie Boy, and Michelin Man, Michelin Tires. So all these mascots are nothing but an effort to put a human face into the brand. And apart from this, some unique fonts, color codes, these create a unique tone of voice and it creates an association for your brand in the minds of the customers. So imagine when we see color red, when we think of when we are thirsty, naturally color red and Coca-Cola's that unique style of writing fonts come into our mind, right? It's deeply connected with thirsty. So that's when your magic, I mean the magic happens. Your brand assets is deeply connected with the code, category code, and what customer craves for. So that is a deep scientific element attached to it. So when I'm thirsty, naturally the color red, or in case of Pepsi, the color blue comes into my mind. So that's the essence of having a unique identity, character, and personality for your brand. It's not it's not separate. You need to link it with the buying behavior of the consumers. So the next one, great brands are physically and mentally available. What do I mean by that? Mental availability is nothing but your distinctiveness, your identity, character, and personality is there in people's mind. We technically call this as brand awareness and brand recall. Brand awareness is nothing but when I am thinking of when I'm thinking of buying a toothpaste, I naturally choose Colgate. Colgate comes into my mind. And what I do is I go to a store and those white packaging, that color red, all those things which I have seen in the advertisement. When I go to a store to make a purchase, all these things my mind recalls and I see the brand here which I have seen in the advertisement. So I naturally tend to pick it up. This is the formula which most of the consumer brands use. It's a funnel, right? You mentally become available and then you are available physically in the stores so that when the customer decides to buy something related to your category and enter into a store, they naturally pick up your brand. It's a fundamental aspect of creating growth for your brand, mental and physical availability. And mental availability has two subcomponents, which I have shared, brand awareness and brand recall. Next layer, physical availability, is very, very critical because we may run a lot of advertising, we may run a lot of brand awareness and campaign exercise. If customer decides to go and buy a brand in the store, if it is not available, the brand is losing an opportunity. We can sense it even in our lives as consumers. You and me can sense this. We could have decided to buy a certain brand, and when we enter into a store nearby our home, that brand is not available. So it means you're losing an opportunity. The customer switches to other brand. We can notice this in our day-to-day life. So, the last but not the least, very, very important aspect of brand building, I mean, the most important characteristics in today's modern marketing era is the social currency. Before that, I wanted to share this idea of user generated content. Today, apart from advertising, how the word spreads is usually because consumers have started creating content. Earlier, prior to the internet era, only marketers create content and consumers listen to it. We create ads, lot of things. It's more of a one-sided communication, right? But today, with the help of social media, YouTube, and all the other channels, consumers have started creating content, and when I post something on social media, when I share my brand experience on social media, the brand is becoming familiar in my social circle. And because a human being shares a brand experience, it has more trust. That's the essence behind user generated content. We technically call this a social mention. And another form of user generated content is reviews, right? When I consume a product and if it is good, I'm going to talk about that in online platforms. Not just that, reviews are not just for online platforms. Even I share my brand experience with my friends and relatives. This part is, we cannot capture the conversations which happens in the real world. But today, the opportunity for brand building, it has both uh, positive and negative side of it. If your brand is remarkable, people talk about it, and your why they talk about it is more important. As I said earlier, we humans are meaning makers. We look for meaning in our life, right? So social currency is how we mint social status by creating content. For example, if I write some content and post it on social media, why do I do that? I look for some social status. How many likes, how many people have liked my content, how many people have shared, how many people have commented on it. That's social currency. Those are the parameters. We generally see it as likes, shares, comments, views, followers. But the deeper significant meaning is humans want social currency. When we interact with our social networks, we crave for currency. And when I encounter a brand that delivers a great experience for me, I naturally tend to share that to my social circle just to get more social currency out of it. We all see this, right? Hey, I went to this movie. The movie was so good. We talk about that in our WhatsApp groups. Hey, I've read this book recently. I do this most of the times. Hey, I read this book recently. It's so good. You have to read it. Why do I do that? Because it's social currency for me. And those brands are getting a natural advantage just because I try to activate my social currency. So that's about it. Here are the 7 key characteristics which I found in most of the great brands. Maybe we could add more layers to it, but these are the foundational building blocks of a great brand, Girdari. Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for
Thank you so much. I think this was one of the best episode so far I've recorded, and the way you spoken passionately about all the characteristics. There's so much to learn for people. Uh, I have few follow up questions with your permission, if I can ask those.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah. So first of all, you talked about 7 characteristics, and you work with lot of brands. I'm sure all 7 characteristics are found in many of the greatest of the great brands. But when it comes to building the brand or the responsibility of the brand manager, what are the characteristics that are often overlooked or undervalued in their minds?
yeah, that's a good question. What brand managers often overlook is the social currency part of brand building. Almost 70 80% of us believe that advertising creates a brand, which is true. I mean, when I say creates a brand, it amplifies the brand, right? Another key element of building a great brand or growing a brand in today's environment is how do I how am I going to capture the social currency aspect of brand building? It literally means what am I going to do to generate more user generated content? The key aspect of it is not under our control. You may ask 5 10 customers to write a review by talking to them, but you cannot scale it. You need the brand has to be remarkable. It has to achieve all the most of the factors that I have shared as the key traits. It has to be remarkable, it has to deliver its brand promise, it has to have its human element, it has to be mentally and physically available. Then you create more user generated content. And most of us have to understand the importance of user generated content. Then the difference between user generated content and paid advertising is this trust. Paid advertising, yes, it creates brand awareness and recall, no doubt about that. It immensely increase the demand of the product. On the other hand, if more people talk about us in social media platforms and even in their day-to-day lives, the brand if the brand gets endorsed more often by the consumers, your paid marketing works like a charm. User generated content usually it is strongly linked with your paid marketing efforts, which most of us do not connect. What do I literally mean by that is if you're running an advertising, I'm seeing that advertising and I'm going and typing your brand name and reviews on social media, sorry, on Google, and I come across a lot of negative reviews. The amount you have spent on paid advertising is not moving to the next layer of the consumer journey, right? On the other hand, you're running a paid advertising. I've seen your brand. People are talking about your brand on social media. Your paid advertising start. It works like a charm. So that's why it's very important to link paid marketing efforts with other organic efforts like user generated content. I mean, this is where we can align these two thoughts and do a great job on brand building.
Yeah, so one of the important aspect of building brand is kind of controlling the narrative or driving the narrative in the positive direction. You talked about negative reviews. Sometimes brands are directly on the verge of getting punished by trolls or people who are not liking it for xyz reasons, maybe a different reason than the brand itself. How do you stay positive? How do you control the or try to build the narrative which is positive for your brand and not immensely negative? Because user generated content, there's not so much control that the brand has on it.
You're bang on. You're absolutely right. You do not have control over the user generated content. And moreover, what happens is, and we all need to agree that negative reviews, you cannot avoid negative reviews on certain cases, right? See, I always watch this spiritual guru. You must have heard about Sadhguru, right? If you go and check his, uh, his social presence, both YouTube, everywhere, you have hell a lot of positive things which people talk about him. On the other hand, you have equally lot of negative reviews about the lot of things which we do not want to enter. Lot of negative reviews about him, but you do, you do not have control over it, right? Because it's happening mm, out of your world. But what I really meant is, if you do a great job, remarkable job, I mean there are two components in this. One area where you have full control over it, and another area where you do not have any control. The area where we have control is the remarkability of our product and service experience, right? If you're extremely good at it, people talk about it. Even if we don't ask them to talk about it, they will talk about it. positively. Yeah, I agree that you do not have any control over it. You do not have control over even negative reviews, right? I mean, today, the challenge for any marketer is this uncontrollable factor. If you want to build a great brand, scale it to a next level, people are going to talk about us. That's for sure. Is it going to be in a positive way or in a negative way? It depends purely on the remarkability of the product and service which we offer. That's what I try to communicate.
All right. So, and see, it's a crowded marketplace, and there are so many copycats for almost every brand on the internet. And you talked about differentiation. So, do you think it is going to be challenging for brands to remarkably differentiate themselves, or is it just because they have so much power, they have so much data? Any good brand in the category can be a dominant player and always stay on top of mind or differentiated in a category.
Yeah, I totally agree to your point that today channels are widely opened. The entry barrier to do a business is all time low. So if you want to launch a beauty product, you can very easily do it. I'm just oversimplifying it. You could hire a contract manufacturer and ask them to produce. You can put a label out of it, put it in Amazon, boom, you have a product. But that's the challenge, right? If you go and check Amazon, beauty products, how many beauty products are there? Lot of beauty products. We could call this as a long tail of brand building. So on one hand, you have uh, big brands like Unilever, who has brands like Lakme, highly positioned with high level of brand recall and awareness, a distinctive brand. On the other hand, the long tail, how many beauty brands we have? The challenge today is, if your brand is not distinctive or different, you may be able to sell to certain, you may be able to scale to certain extent, but post which your profitability erodes and you will not be able to sustain in the market for a long time. Why? Because most of the modern day brands which we see, they operate only on this side of the equation. It means physical availability, only channel focus. I i i mean, during my consulting sessions, most of the FMCG product manufacturers, a lot of them, and come and talk to me, and I see a pattern. They say, we have a product, then we are just trying to push it in a retail outlet, and we have reached a saturation point in Amazon, and we are approaching a retail store, and these retailers are not accepting the brands. Even if they accept, the margins are very low. The payments, they do not pay these manufacturers on time. I asked them, do you know why? The only challenge is, if your brand is distinctive and if it's highly salient in the market, people will enter into that store and they will ask whether your brand is available or not. And so these retail outlets are forced to keep your brand, and then you have a in a better position to have a good margin. And since you're mentally available, your brand's offtake will be more from the physical stores, so they naturally try to get more stock from you. So you get get this cycle, right? So that's the importance of having a distinctive brand in the mind of the consumers, which most of the modern day so-called D2C brands miss. They focus purely on channels, purely on the physical availability of the product, how the brand is distinctive. And you could use two strategies which we discussed. Maybe you create a highly differentiated brand, maybe you target a different customer, you come up with a new proposition which other players are not solving. Then you create a distinctiveness using advertising, using the brand as assets, using color codes, like we talked about Coca-Cola, Nike, and other brands, right? Zomato. And you create this distinctiveness. Then naturally, if your physical availability makes more sense. So to answer your question, today's brands focus only on the channels. They don't think about other elements of brand building. So naturally, they do not have a unique differentiation or higher margins. Even when they saturate from e-commerce channel and move on to the physical store, they struggle there. So these are the challenges you will face if you don't uh, do a do brand building in a very holistic way.
So one of the thing then when it comes to differentiation, one of the thing people talk about is niching out, targeting a particular niche, and maybe appealing to a passionate group of people or a certain community. Do you think that helps in picking up the brand? And if you become a community specific niche brand, how difficult it is to address the larger market at a later stage?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. See, one of the key concept of brand building is positioning. How the brand is positioned in the minds of the consumers. And I often give this example. We all know who's the market leader in toothpaste, right? Colgate. Colgate is the brand which comes to most of our minds when we think of a toothpaste brand. But if you notice how Sensodyne has built a brand, even though the category has a deeply penetrated market leader, I mean Colgate. What they did is, I'll quickly share this mental model. What they did is, Colgate tapped into the entire mass market in the toothpaste segment, like salt, cold toothpaste for diabetics, toothpaste for kids, toothpaste for sensitivity, Ayurvedic toothpaste, or under one single brand, they had all these different markets mingled together. What Sensodyne did cleverly is they took the sensitivity market. It's a very, very clear, specific problem, right? And the market size is huge and it's growing. They took that one singular component from the mass market and they have developed a brand around it, and they position Sensodyne as a sensitivity focused brand, and they are doing really well. We call this, technically we call this a subcategory creation. There is a mass market, and create a niche market. You unplug or unbundle one or an attribute from the mass market and create a brand around it. The reason is, this is the essence of niche building. The key idea is the needs and preferences of the main market and the niche market is totally different. For example, if you face a sensitivity problem, you look for something which is related to sensitivity. And if there is a brand which is clearly positioned on sensitivity, you naturally choose that brand, right? That's the essence of niche building. We can see this in various aspects. I've recently written a short article on this also. For example, in real estate, if you notice, most of the brands tap into building, tap into our needs for stay, right? We need a home. So we call it as apartments. Technically, in real estate, you call it as residential apartments, residential real estate. But if you notice, brands like Asiana Housing, Columbia Communities, they have tapped a unique market, senior living communities, and they have built a home and community around it, and they are doing really well. It's the idea of differentiation stems out from, this mental model I use whenever I create to create a differentiation. There are a lot of mental models. Number one is look for the mass market and divide the mass market into two: your market and the mass market. Your market has to solve a specific need and problem which the mass market often ignores. That's the buzzword, and you can create a brand around it. So you could do a lot of strategies. Maybe I've seen a restaurant here in my native place. This restaurant is unique in the sense it's themed around. It's called haunted. It's a restaurant. It's themed around the concept of haunted. If you go there, you they serve food, but have a lot of ghosts. The entire restaurant is themed like a haunted place. So see, you can. The idea behind this is the principle behind this is you take a normal category and bring a different element into it. Restaurant, we all see a lot of restaurants, but the crowd to this restaurant is very very huge. They're doing really well because restaurant plus you add one more experience to it. It's called haunted. So you could do this in a lot of categories. Take a conventional boring category and add a different story to it. A restaurant for creative people, a community for create a residential community for creative people. Whenever you target a specific market, you are building a niche subcategory. Next is whenever you add or mix another experience or story in a conventional category, you create a new niche. There are a lot of ideas you can do for the purpose of differentiation, but these are the two things which I wanted to share it with you.
Great. So, one question that comes to my mind is when entrepreneurs are starting out, one of the key element is differentiation and niching it to a certain category or community. How do you identify the market or the size of the market so that even in that particular niche you don't reach the saturation point quickly and it becomes kind of your growth becomes stagnant? Because when you are focusing only on a certain niche, there are two challenges according to me. One is it is very difficult to try another subcategory or a different niche when you are recognized as a certain niche brand. That is one. And second is chances of getting saturated or reaching a stagnant growth is very very high when you are operating in a niche. So uh, would you like to put some light on that?
Yeah, sure. Your question makes more business sense. Usually, the thumb rule is your market has to grow minimum 10% per annum CAGR, whatever niche market you choose, right? See, I totally get your point of this worry is always with us, right? When we enter into a niche place, I'm choosing a very small market, and the only way you can be confidently enter into a new market is understanding the future potential of the market. How will this problem grow or decline? For example, I've shared with you an example of senior living, right? The same question: will this problem grow in the future or will this problem become obsolete? I don't think this problem will become obsolete when it comes to senior living homes. It will only grow as the Indian population ages. Uh, we see a lot of nuclear families where people don't stay with the parents, and earlier there used to be social taboo uh, in allowing our parents to live in a separate community. Today, that social taboo is breaking down. It is becoming very normal. So these are the indicators, and very very similar to what I have shared what I have shared now for senior living purpose. You need to do some kind of research and understand and answer these two questions. Is this market growth, or what could be the probability of decline, or the idea becoming obsolete? I can tell you this: when it comes to technology, if you're building a tech product, the life cycle of a tech product is is very less. It means it grows fast. You acquire 1 billion, 2 billion users in 3 4 years, and then it starts declining very slowly. Same thing is happening to Facebook also, right? That platform is saturated in the last 10 15 years or so. Now people are moving to other platforms like Instagram, LinkedIn. Any tech product, you need to be very very careful because its life cycle is very very low, because technology products tend to disrupt. Even if you're a technology marketer, you naturally uh, tend to disrupt your own product. After 2 3 years it becomes obsolete. But commodity type products, commodity type services don't become obsolete so soon. For example, a toothpaste like Sensodyne, you cannot, I mean, there is no technology or uh, any software can make this product obsolete, right? It's a commodity type product. And very very similar example, the senior living concept, no technology can disrupt it, because we humans live in a physical space, and that is not going to die sooner. So that's another way of looking at how your markets, how your niche market, I mean, the viability of your niche market.
All right. So I think we are coming towards the end, but I still have two questions. I would be happy if you can answer that. First thing is, you talked about human element of the brand, and these are the times we also talk about lot about personal branding. You also have a very very strong personal brand. Now, one is the brand has to be human, and another aspect when you talk about personal branding is how someone position himself as a personal brand. And when you talked about these seven characteristics, what are the most important, or which characteristic is most important for someone who wants to build a strong personal brand for themselves?
Yeah, see, this idea of personal branding uh, has become more prevalent because of social media, right? Now, again, if you notice the long tail of celebrity marketing, or long tail of human brands, at the top tail, you see a lot of celebrities who come from sports, movies, and other things. At the longer tail of that personal branding space, you have a lot of influencers, a lot of people who have emerged recently in the last 5 10 years. This space is getting commoditized soon, because you find a lot of people talking about certain aspects. I would say it's getting commoditized. Whenever you try to build a personal brand, the principles which we spoke about, I mean, the principles of building a great brand, business brand, is equally applied to building a personal brand. The sense, you need to have a core competency which you can deliver it to a marketplace, right? Number two, you need to be salient. You need to stand out, be different, be distinctive. I don't want to cite any names. If you notice, prominent personal brands in these days, they adopt all the traits of a great business brand, right? In fact, great business brands need to learn a lot of things from them, right? The way they dress, the way they speak, their tone of voice. their content, everything stands out. It means distinctiveness. They prac- they are mentally and physically available in the minds of customers. Uh, yeah. So I mean, whatever I talked about, these seven characteristics, it's equally applicable when you try to build a personal brand. And merely, I see this as a challenge. I share this with you. Merely churning content, putting out content and social media. If you do that, I have a doubt that whether you build a great brand or not. Because that's a commoditized space. Anyone can create content these days. How it's going to stand out? What's your mission? How distinctive your personal brand is? And when it comes to personal brands, I also believe that there is no need to think like a mass marketing brand. You can even target a small niche like we discussed and build your thought leadership, build your brand even in that small space. So that's another aspect of personal brand, because we when we think of personal brand, we naturally try to compare ourselves with leading celebrities, and we see their huge following counts, and we get stuck. So no need to do that. You can be a niche personal brand leader in a space, and the big advantage is you can be a specialized player in that market. You can, even if you create content, you can deep dive into that space and create content which no one has created in that space. You stand out, you become unique, right? So I mean, the idea of differentiation and distinctiveness is very, very important to build a personal brand in these days where content is becoming a commodity.
True, and then authenticity is equally important for a personal brand as well. It's not possible without being authentic. You can stand out.
Authenticity is highly, highly important, very, very important these days.
I think we have covered a lot of topics and a lot of ground on the seven characteristics. Before we conclude our conversation, your parting remarks.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much, Girdari, for having me on this session. I thoroughly enjoyed sharing my perspectives on brand building. Um, my parting remarks is nothing but whenever you try to build a brand, think of it as a whole. Think of it from think of it like an ecosystem which consists of consumers. Usually, we focus only on consumers, but I mean, in the ecosystem, you have employees, you have stakeholders, other stakeholders, investors. Primarily, employees are very, very important component in building a great brand. Particularly, if you're trying to build a service brand, your employees play a huge, huge role in brand building because they are going to serve the customers, right? You could do a lot of advertising, paid marketing efforts, and bring the customers into your business. But if they are not served well, again, it takes a toll on your brand, right? So for every service brand, I firmly believe employees have to be brought into the ecosystem. And I usually have this mental model. Employee advocacy is equal to brand and customer advocacy. Employee engagement is equal to customer engagement. Employee trust is equal to customer trust. So that's my final remark. I've not shared this in the characteristics of a great brand, but when it comes to service brand, including your employees, bringing in a proper culture, setting up the service mindset inside the company, setting up a proper system. It means you're not relying just on humans, because people can do mistakes, right? Uh, you have a proper system and infrastructure for the service delivery. So these are very crucial. And finally, one thing which I wanted to share before we close this is currently we can scale consumer interactions using automation and all those stuff, right? And it's good. Earlier, for example, if you have a website, if 10, 15,000 people visits your website, you rely only on human chat, and it makes the service component very difficult. Today you can have a chat bot and serve all the customers at one single point of time. So it's highly efficient, no doubt about that. But on the other hand, humans still crave for consumers still crave for human connection. They want to solve a problem. Sometimes they wanted to reach out to a human inside the company. And in today's world, a brand has to balance between both automation and humanization. I call this as humanization. You automate the end of the funnel, automate everything and free up your employees time and make them available to make remarkable human connection. Make them to talk to your customers, at least to few highly valuable customers. You could even allow your employees to go and meet them, take selfie with them, take photographs with them, celebrate birthdays. Today, brands need to operate at two extreme ends. I'm not against technology. Go to the extreme end of automation and all those things. On the other hand, go to the extreme end of humanization. Have coffee with your customers, meet them up, create communities, as you rightly said, have physical interaction. Don't just rely on efficiency because the trend is going fully towards automation technology, and I just wanted to bring the balance back by by uh, by sharing my thought on humanization. That's what the future is moving towards more of the balance between humanization and automation. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so we are coming towards the end of our conversation today. Thank you so much, Rajesh. It was wonderful hearing your thoughts today. And I have been a true admirer since last 10 years on LinkedIn, and I have been consuming a lot of content that you produce and post on LinkedIn, and the authenticity and the connect that you have with people like me is always admirable. And finally, I'm getting lucky, and listening to you firsthand is equally more important for me. uh, I thank listener to for listening this podcast till the end. Stay tuned and subscribe to our channels on YouTube and Spotify. We keep bringing all the 10x marketers like Rajesh, and ask them to share some valuable insights with you. So, and we're launching this episode weekly basis. So stay tuned. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.